Welcome to another in the series of In the Boardroom. I'm David Zidel, and I have the privilege to have Robert Greenstein with us today in the boardroom. We're very privileged today to have almost two talks in one. So Robert Greenstein has been with his family business, Wolf Brothers, which is a jewelry store, and has now taken over, and you'll explain if it's taken over or started, the concept Lego stores in South Africa and running that. And he's going to give us information on both, still involved with both. So it's not like he's left the one and then gone to the other. So as I always start, I'm going to start just asking you a little bit about your background. Sure. Where did you come from? How did you get to where you're going? And then we're going to dig into the businesses a little bit, just to get some input on what are some of the decisions you make, what's important in making decisions when you're running businesses like this. So just to start off with, who are you?
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Thank you for having me here this morning. As Dave said, my name's Rob. Yes, I'm originally from Cape Town. So I went to a Jewish day school in Cape Town, Herzliya, for any of those who know the Cape. And I grew up very much with a family business around us. Business was often table talk. My dad took over a very small fledgling jewelry business when my mom was still pregnant with my sister, who's older than me, and that was in 1973. And my dad had a curio business in downtown Parow, if anyone knows Cape Town. My dad came from quite a hard background, so he didn't have much to his name, but unbeknownst to him, he had quite a strong entrepreneurial bloodline that ran through him. And it's quite a cute story because he had this store in downtown Parow that was named after his aunt and his uncle, and he was selling some curios. And the guy next door to him, who was a caretaker of a jewelry business, wanted to retire, and he wanted to close his business. And this is in 1973. There's no such terms as brand equity, as goodwill. These terms just didn't exist then. And my dad walked into the store. The chap wanted to sell his stock for about 10,000 Rand. My father arranged a bank guaranteed check because he didn't have the money himself. And literally, he took over the store like that. And man, like if you watch the movie, he put his little bell hat on and said, "Here, Mr. Greenstein, here are the keys and cheers." And my father started diving through these boxes and discovered this business. And like I say, he didn't realize what he had, but he had a treasure trove of brand equity. He had a business that had been going since 1902 that he didn't realize. And he started finding his old pocket watches and clocks, and he looked at this and scratched his head and said, "This is cool. That's not so cool. I'm going to close that and I'm going to keep this." And he did. And he built that up. And it was like it really was, if he made 10 Rand from a gold chain sale, went into the till, and it went, 2 Rand of it went to paying our school fees. And he was at work 7 days or five and a half days a week, because there were no Sunday late trading and no Saturday afternoon trading, and no cell phones, fortunately, in those days. But that's the background that I grew up in a very kind of humble, basic business environment. And I'd be sat at the table with my sister, and every night would be, guys, I had this customer in today, and I made this friend, and I did this. And my father was like the ultimate salesman. And that rubs off on you. You're a product of your environment. I grew up through fortunate private schooling at Herzliya. I went to UCT after that. I studied business science, which is a 4-year degree, so I have an honors in information systems. And post that, I went into quite heavy, thick corporate, where I was in management and process consulting, did some good work in the banks, coincidentally at De Beers, and mining. I did some work for our revenue services, and after about 4 years, and again, I'm 22, I don't really not thinking about anything other than the girl that I'm dating and where she's living and whatnot. But I didn't enjoy corporate. I like being the kind of manager of my own destiny, controller of my own destiny. And I started chatting to my dad, and cut a long story short, without even realizing why, my dad now opened a store here in Joburg, out on the West Rand in a mall called Clearwater Mall. And without me kind of realizing what I was doing, I was then stepping back into the family business. And yes, I had this kind of good tertiary education, but all those lessons from all those dinner tables was, I would say, as valuable, if not more valuable, when I entered into that street war in retail. And I always say I stepped out of the boardroom, excuse the pun, I stepped out of the boardroom into the street fight, because trading in retail is hard and it's complex, and it's matured enormously over the last 20, 30 years into kind of the very corporate-like retail that you see in Sandton City and Hyde Park and Mall of Africa. And we're going to spend some time chatting about that and brands and all these good things. So that's where I then started with my family business. So my family business is a mama and papa type business. You know, it's trade, it's buy a gold chain and sell that gold chain. What do you do with the profit? And try get a brand. And, you know, there's a new brand coming to the country. Do we put D&G watches into the store? And you put D&G watches in and they fail horribly. And you've got all that stock sitting there, and what do you do with it? And then you've got this other good brand that you're making good margins, good profits off, but you don't realize that you're using those good profits to support the bad stuff that you're doing. So, you know, there's all those decisions and all those kind of thinking. And subsequent to that, and I'll jump to the later shortly, because we were in quite big malls, we're involved with very good brands. So brands you've heard of like Tissot, Tag Heuer, Montblanc, Amiga, and then a brand called Pandora came into the country. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Pandora charms. And we got very involved in Pandora because I like brands. Firstly, I love shopping. Okay, so it's no problem. But I love brands. And when Pandora came to the country, I'd met a chap at a trade show, and he said to me, Rob, when Pandora comes into the country, whatever you do, you have to get this brand. And I said to him, Duron, his name was Duron, he's an Australian guy, I said, I don't just take on brands. I've been burnt by so many brands. He said, Rob, I don't care. You've got to get this thing. Anyway, we got involved with Pandora. I phoned up the guy when I learned who the wholesaler was. Cut a long story short, got very involved with Pandora. We had Pandora in our few jewelry stores that we had at that time. And also, he wanted to expand his business so we could talk about brands and expansion. And we ended up having a few standalone Pandora stores. I mean, some quite good locations. So like Sandton City, Canal Walk, Somerset West, and in Clearwater Mall as well. And this, I'm sure, is part that you guys are going to talk about a lot. But that took me to Lego. And I know it sounds weird, how did I get from charms to Lego? But I went into a toy store when my son was 4, and I stood in the Lego store and my brand alarm went off. And I said to myself, why am I standing in this store? The presentation of the product, which is a beautiful product, is horrible to me. The staff are not giving me the advice that I should be getting, because everything comes down to the advice and the service level that you get. We can unpack what service level is, because people talk about bad service. I want to talk about what bad service is. Bad service is not hello man. And I stood in front of the Lego sets, and I thought to myself, this is just Pandora. This is just Pandora in colorful boxes. And I went through an exercise. Actually, I came home from that afternoon. I said to my wife, let's try open a Lego store. She said, are you mad? She said, you mad? I said, okay, let's try open a Lego store. I got hold of the country manager of Lego South Africa, phoned him up, young Danish guy who was managing the country at that time. And I got a meeting with him. And I slowly built a rapport with him over several years. And when they were ready for Lego to come in a standalone manner into the country, he phoned me up. He said, Rob, we're ready now. Do you want to tender? And we tendered. And I didn't tender with my family. I tendered in my own right, because my father was giving me a bit of grief, and he was worried I was going to be splintering my attention. And I said, but I was hell-bent on getting this brand, that I said, I'm going to go after this thing. And we tendered, and the proverbial dog that catches the bus. And I felt my jaw close on the bus when I got that phone call from the key account manager for South Africa saying, Rob, I've got some fantastic news for you. And I said, what is it? She says, you've won the license for Retail South Africa. And I put the phone down. I was on my way. I'll never forget. I was on my way to a polygraph test with 5 staff members for the children's side, which we'll talk about staff. And I put the phone down, and excuse my vocabulary, the fear of God got into me, because, like I say, I felt the bus start accelerating. And I phoned up my best friend from RST, who's a finance guy, and he's a super entrepreneurial guy. And I said, buddy, I told you about this Lego thing. Well, you're not going to believe the call I just got. And we pulled a meeting with him and my wife. And my wife left her corporate position. And cut a long story short, the 3 of us now have a Lego business that's quite substantial. a lot of lessons to be learned through that. So, I mean, I've simplified it a lot. If I can use one kind of analogy, I was fortunate enough to be at 947 when we launched the one store, and Black Coffee walked in, and the head of 947 turned to me and went like this. He said, "Rob, that's the lesson that overnight success takes 25 years." So, Black Coffee's kind of come to fruition. The story I've just told you, it sounds like an easy story, but there's lots to chat about around. So that's a longer answer to your short question.
So I just want to backtrack a little bit, because you said it was like a mom and pop store, and your mom's involved in the business as well.
My mom is, yeah.
So when you had the family discussions, it was the whole family, and your family now, it's mom and dad involved in the same business.
Yes,
hopefully.
And yeah, so currently the Wolf Brothers side of things is my mom and my dad and myself. We have a partner in one store as well. And what's interesting is a lot of these decisions you make when your business is fledgling and growing, and it is like a mom and pop business, you make decisions, I think, based on the next step sometimes, and not 10 steps down the way. And I think it can be very difficult, as my friend often says, to look through the windshield and look 3 stop streets down, rather than just the initial one that's in front of you. So, I joined my parents. There was no discussion about ownership structures, about shareholdings. It was, guys, let's open a store. Boom, let's open a store. And I'll tell you something that will maybe resonate here. After 2 years or so, I phoned up and I want to have a chat to you. And he said, "Sure, what's it about?" I said, "I feel like I don't actually own anything. I feel like I'm a clever guy. I've got all these ideas." I said, "But I've joined and we've opened the shop, but if I go apply for a car loan tomorrow, I actually can't get one. I earn a salary out of the one shop. But what's the ownership structure here?" And then we started thinking about, these theoretical things that you lecture. What is the shareholding? What is the ownership structure of this business? How is this business structured? What are job roles? How are we going to grow it? Rather than just clap your hands together and let's open a store, because that's what we did. And I think that in a family business, it can be tricky because, there's emotions that come in. In fact, in all businesses, emotions. But I think that in businesses that are, I'm guessing, the audience is involved in, these are some of the things I want us to think about is, what am I going to do down the line? And it's tricky to consider.
So if we go back to the first store that you opened.
Yeah.
Can you take us through your thought process and what you had to go through in terms of location, in terms of staffing, in terms of how do you price the stuff? And maybe get into a little bit, if you can, just around margins. And if you sell it for this, costing you this, but then you've got all sorts of overheads. How do you take that into account?
So we opened that store in a bit of a Hail Mary. Firstly, I was storing corporate. My dad came up here and spent several weeks here on his own, standing in dust, trying to get the store opened. Look, fortunately, we do have a good background in retail. My dad's got great experience. So, choosing a location in the mall is the old adage, location.
So how did you choose the location in terms of, one, where specifically, and two, where within the actual mall? Does that make a difference?
It makes a massive difference because foot traffic is very important, and you do pay a premium for it. But you want to look where the anchor tenants are. And you want to look at corners. Corners are always great. So, if I was going to open a lemonade stand on my outside my house, I'd walk to the corner and do it. I wouldn't do it outside my house because you're going to get more foot traffic. There's some educated understanding about where traffic comes in. And even then, when you're looking at the floor plan, it's quite difficult because you don't know exactly what the flow is going to do afterwards. But yes, you have to be quite cautious and look at the anchor tenants and also the pause areas in a mall. So, like a mug and bean's a good thing. I've heard in retail that they can't capitalize on coffee stands in shopping centers. You walk around Sandton and have a look at how far you have to go to get a coffee. You probably don't have to walk more than 15, 20 meters. It's probably 40 coffee places, be it KFC or Wimpy all the way through to Seattle or something fancy. So the location, we had some good understanding there, and I think that it's location. But it's an old cliche that holds very much true. Staff, we battled, and it's a lesson I still, after 20 odd years in retail, we make mistakes. The one thing I have learned, and I would say this, and again, you're going to get some cliches from me. I apologize in advance. But I would say invest in staff before you invest in anything else more. I always say my two challenges in business are number one, staff, and number two, suppliers. Customers, I can find customers, and I'll make good customers. I back myself to do that. But to find great people and to look after them is really, really hard. And we have that problem now within Lego. We have quite an intricate interview process. And there's technology that people are using for interview processes, like for instance, doing videos and automating the interview process up front. We use an automated process on our website that people have to go through a filtration and answer certain questions. And our view is, A, if you're not prepared to answer the question, then you're not deserving of a first interview. And B, if you don't answer the question well enough, then obviously you don't deserving of a first interview. And then there's also the process you go, when they start in the training, because you go through this wonderful interview process. Someone starts, and it's quite incredible that you thought you've got a Rolls Royce coming into your business, but actually, it's not. You've got an old jalopy that's really not running on four cylinders. So staff really, guys, if you do have staff that you're working with, think very carefully about what makes you tick and what makes you do your job, and make sure that you have methods and processes in place for the people that you're employing to do that. I'm of the opinion, sorry, I'm going to come to your question, but staying on the staff view, my mom often says to me, Rob, you've got a very kind of loose-ish way of managing. And I say to her, it's not that I'm loose with my management. I believe very strongly in something I learned 20 years ago, which is a care and growth model when you have people working in your business. And the more autonomy I can give someone in my business and their ability to do the job that I'm doing frees me up to do the job that I want to go and do. So, often guys in small businesses get stuck on the buying. They're so cautious of the stock and the management of that they're unable, especially in a jewelry business where jewelry is very, very high value. I mean, I'm now in a situation where in my stores, the managers of those stores can go and do the buying. And yes, I'll oversee it because obviously there's budgets and things that have to come in place. But it means that they can, on a monthly basis, if they've sold 5 watches, they need me to do that. They can go and do that. Yes, there can be an approval process, but that's an hour out of my time that I've got to go and do something else. And maybe it's a cricket game for my son that I want to go watch. Maybe I'm being selfish, but maybe it's something else in my business that I can then focus on. And one of the pieces of advice that a friend gave me when I started, I've never forgotten it, is don't let your operational work crowd or stop you from doing your project work. So whenever you are doing something, if you are focused solely operationally, 24/7, your business isn't growing. You have to have projects running on the side. If you don't have a project running on your side, your business isn't growing.
So is that looking 3-4 steps?
That's looking through the windshield. And a project could be a marketing project. It could be a massive expansion to open another branch. It could be a new web page. It could be a new collection that you're designing for your clothing range. But if you are only focused on this season's collection, what about summer next year? We're already planning Valentine's Day and Mother's Day in the toy business for next year. We finished planning Christmas. We know what we're doing for Christmas. So you've got to have those projects happening. Okay, sorry, I'm jumping around quite a lot. Okay.
So just going back to the Jerusalem. So you want to open up a new store?
Yes.
You need stock, you need location, you need people.
Yeah.
How do you get things, in what order do you get it? How do you plan it that it comes together at the same time? Are you standing with stock before you got people? Are you standing with people before you got stock? And how do you know, especially in the jewelry business? I mean, as you said, it's costs a lot of money. How can you trust somebody you've just hired? How do you go through that whole process?
Well, we're actually looking at the moment of expanding the jewelry business by a branch and opening down a store in Gateway in KZN. It's interesting because I've been asked how am I advertising for staff. So far, I haven't advertised for staff. I'm only going for word of mouth. I've asked all the brand names. I've asked all the companies I deal with, and I've had some good references. And so far, I've actually secured 4 outstanding people purely through word of mouth, which in the jewelry trade is quite valuable, excuse the pun, because you are dealing with a high value product. Dave, let's go back and just try and unpack the question a little more. So I think that jewelry is an interesting one because jewelry is got a very long shelf life, which makes it complicated. Whereas, and it makes it unusual compared to other products. If you take a product like Pandora, we would do our planning with stock so that our stock turnover rate matched the terms I was getting from Pandora. So just think about that. I could order 10 charms. I knew that I could sell 10 charms within 45 to 60 days. And Pandora were giving me 60 days from statement, which means I'm using Pandora's terms to try and get that. Now, that can be a little bit risky because you can also go through a lull. You can also go through a cold patch. You can just, Santon can close an entrance because they're renovating and all of a sudden your foot traffic goes down. You don't sell those 12 charms. You only sell 8. So, there is an element of capital reserve and planning that you need to plan for. I think that Dave and I started speaking a little bit about this before we started. What's interesting about my business and what's hard about retail in general is that retail's got a lot of ingredients. There's a lot going on in the cauldron in terms of infrastructural costs, CapEx costs, and operational costs. So you've got your operational costs daily, like staff, or monthly, should I say, like staff. You've got obviously your fixed costs like rental. Those are your 2 biggest costs in a business like retail. And we look at those costs, and I know it sounds a bit cold because we're talking about people, we talk about things, but at the end of the day, if you take it up a level and look at those costs as a percentage of what your net profits are. So we talk about cost of occupation. And cost of occupation is both the physical cost and also the staff cost, because I can't get away from those. And also I can't play games at the end of the month that even if I've had a poor trading month, the staff in the store, that's not their risk. That's the business's risk. So I have to pay my staff and the landlord, because otherwise the landlord's going to come and close me. And I won't have a business. And if I don't pay my staff are going to say, Rob, I'm going to go work for Joe next door. And that's what's happening in the business. I see it all the time. People jump ship and change. So those are quite big and important. Then there's a lot of hidden costs. Now, even big businesses don't take the time to have a careful look at their income statement. And it's interesting because there's so much stuff on a monthly basis that seeps into your expenses. And you think, I can just afford another 1,000 Rand on Fiverr. And I can just afford another 500 Rand on that subscription. And when COVID hit, even though we've got this wonderful brand called Lego, we realized that we were having some challenges. And we spent hours and days and months stripping, and we cut down costs enormously. So even with a very attractive product, there were a lot of those purpose costs that made us unprofitable that we stripped out on. Yeah.
So getting into Lego, is Lego a complete different business to the jewelry store and how so?
So if you're talking about costing and pricing, it's very different because when you deal with a branded product, like a Nike shoe or a Pandora charm or a Lego box, generally the prices are advised. So understand that we have a law against price fixing in South Africa. So price, by definition, it's very important to understand this, is an invitation to purchase. It's not a contract. Once you sell something to a person, you actually have entered into a contract with them. If you go and speak to a contractual lawyer, that coffee cup that you buy from Seattle, in theory, is actually a contract. Okay, I don't know if you've thought about it like that. All right. So price is a pure invitation to purchase. And we work in a society, or we work in a country on a premise of willing buyer, willing seller. It's an invitation. I don't have to sell it to you. Okay. And things like the Consumer Protection Act, if you guys have got questions about that, we can chat about that later and what that means and where people misunderstand it. So we get given a recommended retail on Lego, and I'll use Pandora charms, and it's up to us whether we want to sell them for that. I can decide to take a Pandora charm that's been recommended to sell for $12.99, and I can sell it for 500 Rand. That's my prerogative. I'll make a total loss on it because the margin isn't there. Because what they're doing, what the supplier will do is they'll give you a recommended retail, and then they will invoice the item to you at X. And different products have got different margins. So something like a charm may range anywhere from a 35 to 50% margin, which means you're making sometimes 100% profit. But there's a reason why you might make between 65 and 100% profit. Go back to my shelf life argument. If you've got an item that's sitting on the shelf for a year, you have to make 100%. In fact, you might have to make it 200%, because you have to make enough capital appreciation on that item to pay for the rest of the stock. And customers like to walk in to retail stores because they think that they can evaluate that retail store and say, look how much money they're making off this product. Well, that's not really true. The net margins in retail are really quite fine at the end of the day. If you can run a retail business on a net margin of somewhere between 9 and 12%, you're doing very, very well. Now, put that in perspective with what you can do with your money. You can take your money and you can, I was explaining this to my 10-year-old the other day. You can stick it under your mattress, you can put it in a call account, and you can get a return. So you have to think about those aspects, yeah. So the important thing to chat about, and this is actually where the whole conversation comes through, is the brand equity of what you're doing. So a shop like Pandora, if you're selling charms, yes, you can decide to discount those charms. But when you get involved with a brand like that, or a brand like Lego, you also sign a bit of your soul away in terms of what you're willing to give back in the brand equity. Now, let me explain brand equity. We talk about brand environment and brand universe. So, I'm not sure who here has been fortunate enough, but if you've managed to go to London and walk into the Lego shop in Leicester Square, like, it's jaw-dropping. You can sit in a Lego tube and have your picture taken with the Queen next to you. It's amazing. And that environment is, if it's a word, immersive. It just draws you in, and that's what you want in a retail environment. Okay. Now, you don't get that if you're going to have a discount spaza mentality, because you're going to get too caught up on how do I sell this product quickly and how do I turn it over fast. And the larger brands in the world don't want that. So even if it's a New Balance, or if it's a Pandora, I'm trying to think about the brands that you guys would walk into, or a Nike store. There's an element of understanding that you've got to deliver the brand environment, and then you've got to look at the business. And this was the tricky side of Lego. So we went through a long 3-month negotiation. Once we'd won the contract, we then had to negotiate the contract. We'd won the license. I said, Rob, yeah, you guys, you can have the license. Now we've got to sign a contract that thick. And then you start going through with lawyers. Lego's lawyers sitting in London. We employed a lawyer in Cape Town. And you start running through these pieces. And there are clauses in there. For instance, the one clause was, when you fit a store, all the furniture is supplied by us. All the designs are done by Lego internationally. The stores are fitted out. You have to buy the furniture from our producer overseas, and you have to import it yourself. Oh, and you've got to pay the designer in Germany, and you've got to pay for the furniture. And potentially, when our project manager wants to come to evaluate the store, you've got to pay for his subsistence and travel. You start looking at this and you're going, wow, well, look at that. Love the toy. But and you've got to now weigh all those up, all those costs. And, you talk about, I was chatting to you guys before we started, and business cases, business plans, what are those things? There's no template for it. If you're not good at Excel, you've got to get good at Excel. And Excel is only a vehicle for your thoughts. So you've got to put everything in there. We started putting permutations in. Well, the project manager comes out from Czech Republic 3 times, and he flies economy, and he stays at this hotel, Google the hotel. And we said, okay, well, that trip's going to cost us 75,000 Rand. Okay, how many Lego sets we're going to sell to make up 75,000 Rand? When you employ a staff member, and I'm not sure some of the businesses that are sitting in the rooms, but if you're in a consulting business, if you're doing accounting, if you're doing books for people, how many man hours do you have to sell to pay for the lady to sit next to you to help you fill out those contracts? Think of it like that. Yeah. But answer some of what you're saying. Yeah.
So how do you get to those numbers though? Because it's almost, before, if I had to go into the now, all of a sudden I think I could make it work. I don't know what I'm going to sell. All of a sudden, he has another 75,000 for someone else.
Yeah.
Can you cross off the fact and say, no, we want to Africanize the store? I don't have to pay for all of those. You can't.
No, you can't.
And so you've got this massive overhead. It's the most uncertain time in a business before you start. You're signing yourself in. I mean, is it madness?
No. Yeah, there is a little bit. There's a little bit of madness. I like to think of my business. I do two parts to a business plan. I do something called an operating model before I do a business plan. So when we had Pandora, and so I'm going to come to my operating model. What's interesting is we started Pandora in Clearwater Mall. We had a small point of sale in the window, about 1 meter wide. Then over season, we did an in-store activation just outside the store. And the in-store center activation did so well that we kept it for 6-8 weeks. And what I noticed when I went from that window to that, what I was doing there, I did 4 times over there. And then we wanted to open Pandora at the store in Cape Town. But the guys from Pandora said, look, we want this brand to come in a big way. So we want you to put a shop in. And when we put the shop in, which is now a whole wall of branding and much more stock, and remember that term, environment, that did 3 times what the activation did. So now we're doing this. Now Pandora wants to open the first store. So I do something called an operating model. And this is something I'd like you to think about. Whatever your business is, break it down to a granular level. So if I am selling physiotherapy hours, how many hours are there in a day? How many patients can I see within an hour? Build in your lunch hour. Build in your where you've got a lull because kids and people are at work or whatever it might be, and you've got busy times. And work out, and then you put in one cell what my charge per hour is and break that down to 10-minute increments. And I can see a patient 3 times in an hour. So you've got 3 or maybe 20-minute increments, you've got 3 20-minute increments. Do that operating model. Get it to such a granular level that you can say, I take on 1 more patient a week. What does it do to my turnover at the end of the month? So you get a turnover model happening, you understand? I did that with Pandora. I said, we sell charms. We sell bracelets. We sell necklaces. We sell earrings. They're going to want us to sell gold jewelry and diamond jewelry because there was a range of gold and diamond jewelry. How much of that could we sell? We thought they were going to introduce sunglasses. So I put a line item in for sunglasses. And I literally put in a model week by week from Monday to Sunday of how many I thought I could sell each day. Because you start breaking it down like that, you think, okay, listen, if I walk into Santon on a Monday, it's that busy. How many charms does that shop sell?
But where do you get? I mean, I can assume something that's completely.
You've got to do a little bit of research. You've got to do a little bit of research. I mean, we were fortunate that I had some data coming from other jewelry shops, but you've got to do research. I'll come to the toy business.
And I want to get also, while you're on this,
yes,
you've also got an online store.
Yes.
So that gives you, once you're running, it gives you more data analytics that you can analyze.
It does.
And kind of what's the cost structure of that online? They say it's a lot cheaper. Is it really a lot cheaper? And
yeah,
does that help you with the other businesses as well, understanding the market?
So remind me to talk about halo effect, if I forget. Okay. To go back to the operating model quickly, just to finish that. When we opened the first standalone store that I've ever opened, which was the Pandora shop in Santon City, which is as you come into the Protea, which is on the side over there. It's now owned by Pandora themselves, but we had that store for 6 years. I literally looked at it day by day, and I started scratching my head and thinking, oh my gosh, that's how many charms I have to sell just to pay rent and salaries. I'm not even going to pay my kids' school fees yet. Okay. And then you've got to start having some conversations with yourself and thinking about it. The toy one was interesting because I had no data on toys. So there again, you've got to do your research. You've got to look at, where we all start, friends and family. I got a connection to someone who'd been involved in the toy business, and I asked him some advice. I sat next to someone at a dinner for Santon who didn't realize who he was sitting next to, and he owned a toy business, which was a very interesting evening. And he had 1 or 2 whiskeys too many, like my wife even sat next to me. We were like, this guy was just telling us. We're like, keep going. So you try and use that information, and then there is that risk element. There really is. But in whatever business you're doing, you're selling something. You're selling your time, you're selling a product, you're producing something, whatever it may be. Get it down to a granular level in an operating model. Make that operating model look like a standard grade 8 school project. And it can look, gee, this looks overly simple. But if you can oversimplify it, better. And I still have that original operating model. I needed to sell 196 charms a week in Pandora. I think that kind of was the number.
So that was the number. And then what were you selling? And is it a thing that if you know what the target is, you get it? I mean, you can't stand outside Pandora and say, listen, I need 2 more charms to make my target. How do you entice people?
Yeah, no, so look, you do. And I mean, so with Lego was quite a complicated process because when we were opening stores, we had to then do quite a complicated business case. And we were given a template by the finance guys overseas to complete because they don't know our market. And that became quite complicated. Interesting, their model works very much on conversion rate. So conversion rate is how many feet come into the store versus how many sales you actually make. And we needed to work to a conversion rate of about 15 or 12%, I think it was. So in the Lego stores, if you walk into any of the stores, there's actually a foot counter. If you look up, it's telling us how many people come into the store. And then we do track that still every single day. We opened a store in Mall of Africa last year, and our conversion rate's a bit lower. We were hoping for a 15%, and currently I think we're sitting at about 11.6. And we can see it immediately. You know, as soon as there's a public holiday, we can see the foot traffic go up and you can see the densities change. And we've got metrics that we use, average transaction values, units per basket, you know, how do we increase the basket size? And you start thinking about your business in all these ways. Do you want to chat about the online thing a little bit?
Yeah, and also don't forget about the Halo.
Yeah, so let me chat about online and then we'll talk about Halo. So yes, we are in the fortunate position. We've got a tremendous international brand, okay? We started the online business because we've got the official stores for South Africa. We've also got the official online e-commerce site. Now, go back to what I said earlier about price limitation to purchase. And Lego sell to other companies. There's lots of other toy retailers. Maybe you don't like coming into our Sandton store. I mean, I'll be disappointed to hear that. But maybe you live closer to Rosebank and there's a lovely toy store in there and you like the service you get and, you know, you buy your Lego there. The reality of it is, though, is that as you build up and you have this official platform that matches the official stores, you get this halo effect where you start to think, and this is the whole point for brands with me. You know, if you're a runner, for me, I don't want to have to connect. I need some Nikes, Total Sports Nike. I want to go Nike. I want to go Pandora. I shouldn't have to think I need to walk into a Wolf Brothers or another jeweler. And that's where we go now. We sit on our couch, we start and we Google, and that needs to mimic what's happening in the store. So if you are putting a website out there and you do have a shop front or you've got an office, think about that it should mimic the two, okay? We started the online store shortly after we opened the first store in Sandton. We started with using our staff in Sandton. And growing incrementally, we had the store, we've had the online site for 5 years. So we started fulfilling 1 or 2 orders a day from the back of the store. We now have a warehouse in Marlborough. We have 3 full-time people working in the warehouse. And we do anywhere between maybe 80 and 100 orders a day. So, you know, it's grown to quite a large business. What I will say to you is that online is not easy. I would almost say that online is as or more difficult than the physical stores because Google is not really your friend, especially if you are their customer. If you are their, if you're their browser, it's brilliant. You know, you want a quick restaurant to go to, and you Google David's Burger Joint. It shows you the Google ratings. It gives you directions to go there. It gives you the phone number. Everywhere. But in terms of having an online store, for if there's anyone watching this or listening that is thinking about using e-commerce as a mechanism for income, it's doable. So please, I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm just saying it comes with a lot of hidden challenges. So our cost of infrastructure, do not underestimate Google. We pay Google as much as I do in some malls for rental. Wow. Just think about that. Yeah, but without it, I don't do the business. So, I mean, I don't want to give away, certain things I don't want to give away too much, but of our leases, I think there's 2 or 3 leases that are less And I'm talking about super regional malls in this country, the biggest that you can walk into, that we pay less a month than we do Google. And then don't underestimate what I'm paying my agency to get the material ready for Google. We pay them also. So actually, I could argue that if you add the agency to Google, they're more expensive than a landlord.
But you don't have the staff.
That's excluding staff. We've got 3 staff members, but there's a hidden staff member. He's the guy who goes with every order. Don't underestimate the box costs and the courier costs. Okay. So if I add that cost of infrastructure, okay, we call it cost of occupation. That cost is probably the same as what I have in Santee.
And you have more returns on an online than you do in a physical store?
Possibly. We have a few returns for a few reasons. We have a return because someone changes their mind. We have a return because a box gets damaged. Or we have some losses. We do get lost parcels. Not enormous. And then the other loss, which comes in and talks to metrics. We talk about metrics as well, just now about measuring the business. We put the wrong things in boxes sometimes. So, and I'm happy to put my hand up because when we came out of COVID, the shops were all closed and online opened 2 weeks before the shops did. And online went like a bat out of hell doesn't have what online had. It was literally turbo boosters, Michael Knight on a rocket ship launching to Mars in nanoseconds. Okay. So much so that we had all our Santon guys, we pulled in staff from Menlyn. My wife, myself, we were all packing boxes. It was brilliant. Except I took a Technic box that was valued at 2,500 rand that had the word transporter in it and put it in an order that had the word transporter in it. I didn't read the fulfillment slip properly. And the box that the guy had bought was 300 rand and not 2,500 rand. So that kind of thing creeps in. Not so much anymore, but it does creep in.
And he obviously phoned and complained that he got 2,500.
So interesting story, and I put it out for you to think about this. The guy sent us an email. He said, "Hey guys, received the set for my son. My son was so we brand our boxes. If you ordered it from us before, you get a. I'm a big one that believes in experience. Why do people buy from Vuitton? Because they want to walk around with a yellow bag. People walk around with that bag. They'll make a point of it to shop all day. So they're walking around with a yellow bag before they go home and unpack the bag that they're then going to wear because it's about experience. Anyway, so we believe in experience. Our boxes are beautiful. They come to your house and it's branded Lego and it just creates a lot of excitement in the household when the box arrives. So he gets home from work, this customer, very nice guy, sitting out in a non-super regional area. And he emails, cut long story short, his son opened the box before he got home, so excited with this Lego set, built the whole thing in 4 hours. Guy came home scratching his head and emailed us, said, "Guys, I don't know what to do here because here's a picture, my son's built it, but you've sent me that and I only paid that." Phoned him. And I can't remember what his name was, but I said to him, "Dave, it's our mistake." I said, "Look, we're totally out of pocket for things." And he very kindly said to me, "I don't want you to be out of pocket because some humans you deal with actually very nice people." I said, "Well, what would you have paid for the set?" He said, "Rob, what does the set cost?" I said, "I think it's about 2,000 rand. He said, "Well, look, I probably would have gone to 1,200 rand for my son's birthday present. I've only spent 600. I said to him, "If you're willing to pay the extra 600, it's very kind of you. I'll send you our bank account details." And he did. Wow. And he's bought from us again. And stuff like that goes wrong. So sorry, digress slightly, but it's a nice story.
So, and he's bought subsequently, and has he ever phoned and said, "Listen, you sent me what I ordered. I wanted something different"?
No, I never got back and looked at his profile, so no, but he hasn't done that.
So there's a story, just to digress a bit, with an ATM, that people went to the ATM, and every now and then it gave out, it was in America, an extra $1 by mistake. And they realized something was wrong because there were queues outside this one ATM. So every now and then you wanted $10, gave you $11. And the banks, instead of correcting it, they advertised that the ATM's doing this. So you could.
Interesting. Yeah. So, so let me just think if there's more to say about the online. I mean, so online's growing tremendously. Something to think about. I mentioned the word metrics. Retail's full of metrics. Retail's full of metrics because we're selling product. There's margins. There's quantities. There's price points. There's price brackets. There's transaction values. There's basket sizes. In online, there's how many things we can afford in so much time, and we use all of those things as well for commissions and incentive structures. So the other thing I'll say to you is think carefully about the metrics you can also use in your business to motivate your business, and incrementally. I mean, I suppose the rugby is a big topic at the moment. Watching the World Cup, when those guys walk back into the change room and they look at that game that was played the other night and they lost by 5 points, they'll go back and look at the metrics. They'll go back and say, guys, how many breakdowns did we lose? If we had won one more breakdown, could we have gotten an extra point there? If we had held the ball for a minute longer or second longer, what would have happened? So
in that case, we all know the story was just kicking. That's all it was.
Well, those are metrics, aren't they? There's 11 points there, so it's just metrics. But the point is, think about it again. And like I say, we've all got different businesses. People like to use retail as examples because it's so rich in data. There's so much going on with it, and not just one topic or one part of it has the answer. But I would argue that even if you're running a physiotherapy business, if you're running, an accounting practice, if you're producing, clothes that you're selling to your friends, if you're producing cakes, whatever it might be, there's metrics there. I mean, we had this discussion with someone actually over the weekend whose sister's a chef, and I was discussing the thing. We talked about pricing on cakes. If you're making cakes as a business, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it, but there's metrics there. And I mean, I tell you, an unbelievable business that I'd love to understand more about is we get every week the meals that come to your house. You Cook. Any of you guys use You Cook? Go and research You Cook. And if you don't, I mean, I'm not going to advertise for them, but we use it every week. It's a brilliant service. But again, if they can buy more coriander by the kilo and cut their metric by 10 cents per kilo or 10 cents per gram, think of what that does to the 5,000 households they're sending meals out to every week. Yeah.
So if I can ask you that, just for businesses in general, and I know metrics is very specific to the business you're in, and then, as you've said, there's hundreds, thousands of them. What would you say are the top 5 metrics that any business should really look at first of all? Can you do that, or is that too difficult?
I'm going to give you a bit of a boring answer there, I think, because I think I'm going to sound a bit like a textbook or a bit cliched, but I think you've got to be very cautious about your net profit, what your actual net profit is. I think people don't pay enough attention to what your net profit is. People get gung-ho in terms of cash flow. And we're fortunate with Lego, we've got lots of cash flow all the time. Got to the end of our first year, we weren't really profitable. And my business partner, who's a finance guy, started scratching his head and saying, Rob, love the fact that we got this red logo and I can tell my friends got a Lego store. Wow. He says, I don't care about that. So I don't operate with an ego. I don't care about the fact that we're a Lego store. He says, there's got to be an ROI out of this thing. Otherwise, to quote my other partner, I may as well go lie on the beach. May as well. You want to be involved in something, you want to build something. I very much believe we work for fulfillment as well as income. But at the end of the day, I'd also like to lie on the beach. So if it's going to be that much hard work, well, I'll go be a beach bum. There's something I wanted to say, though. We had a meeting with our agency, and actually, the story even gets worse. We've got 2 agencies because we've got an agency who does our search stuff for Google. We've got an agency that does all the preparation of the work. So, sorry, the cost of Google just went up more in my head. Okay, but we had this discussion about Google, and Google likes to give you, if any of you guys run any Google Analytics or anything to do with Google, you get this very so-called content-rich report at the end of the month showing you how many visitors you had to your site and conversion rates and organic traffic and so on. And I think it's like a lot of gumph. Yes, I've done some work and I've got some brands. I consider myself quite a simple guy. I like things dumbed down. I often say to people, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. I don't want to. And I look at these Google reports, and Google takes a lot of credit for stuff it's not actually doing. And it will show you and say, you spent 5,000 Rand on Google AdWords, and look how much revenue we brought you. We brought you all this revenue. There's 40,000 Rands worth of revenue. You got an 8 times return. You should be thanking us. And actually, no, not really, because like if I think about Lego is very seasonal and we run launches every month. So in August, we had a spin the wheel activation on our website. So there's a new buzzword on web pages, gamification. So we had a game on our site. We could spin the wheel and you get a coupon or you get a prize, whatever. So we're running that. We had a birthday day and we had a huge launch with over 60 products launching in August. So Google looks like a hero. But actually, I think we would have done a large proportion of that business without Google. And Google's taking credit for our significant spend and showing us that we've got a 10 times, 15 times return. Well, I could argue maybe I'd drop my spend by 40% and maybe I'd get a 14 times return and I would be more profitable and my net profit would have been better. So I'm just using those Google reports as an analogy because I'm not a fan of them. And don't get excited when you have a very busy month and you've sold lots of Pandora charms, because if you've overcapitalized on stock and we had a great Christmas, but actually I bought 500 too many charms, I've still got to pay Pandora, and at the end of the day, I've got no profits left in the bank. It's all sitting in my stock. So I think the biggest thing, I'm not giving you 5, net profit, guys. Analyze that income statement all the time. And don't overpower fiber. Find another fiber producer, because I know we've got some small businesses watching this, and I know that bigger businesses have got bigger fiber issues, if I can call it that way, with bigger service delivery costs. But I'd say income statement.
Great. We're going to start wrapping up and we'll start asking questions. But before we get there, I just want to ask you your advice for any business. Have you got kind of 5 rules to say to someone who's looking to go into business or has already started a small business? These are Robert's 5 golden rules to live by in business.
Look, I don't know if I'll get to 5, and I don't know let me think of a couple of things in any particular order. So the reason I put down the fact that we got to Lego, which I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's a big brand and it's a big deal, is relationships and the nurturing of those relationships. And again, I'm going to give you some cliches here, but that was 15 years of relationship building. The ability to walk in to Sandton City, which is the premium mall in this country, and phone up the leasing manageress at the time. Rob, how's a cup of coffee? That didn't happen overnight, And I think that those relationships are based on ethics. So the one thing we didn't touch on is jewelry is obviously a very ethically based business. So I think that cultivate the relationships and deal with people the way that you want to be dealt with. I believe in swings and roundabouts. Sometimes it won't go your way. Sometimes you will lose out. Sometimes you will be taken advantage of. But I believe in swings and roundabouts. So I think the relationships that you can build, that you can use, and I think that's a bit of a cliche. I think don't trade with an ego. So my one business partner said to me, don't make your decisions. And when you feel you're making a decision with your ego, step back and take more time.
So what do you mean by making a decision with ego?
Maybe you're trying to get more margin for something. Maybe you're trying to get a deal done because you feel it's a reflection on yourself. I think you'll know when that time arises. I'll be sitting with a supplier, and sometimes, especially when you're buying stock, there's an element of buying, selling, and you could feel like you're in a slight position of power. Don't do that. So I always say I don't trade with an ego. I want my shops to do well, and I do that as well with the people who work in my stores. I try to stay away from using the term staff, my staff, because they're not possession, and the people that you have in your business need to mimic yourself in what they're doing. And that we spoke about the leadership and growth kind of model. I'm a big one. I had a situation actually this morning before I came through here, and spoke to the lady. And in fact, I have to have a meeting with her after this. She knows she's safe with me, and that's another good word. My other partner uses that. My other partner, he uses the word safe. If people feel safe with you, you feel safe with those people in your business, then your business is in a safe place. So that's also just, I like to think about this kind of vocabulary, because if you kind of work with those words and you kind of use those words in the way you're operating, those words come back and treat you the same way. Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like, I feel like we've been talking a lot around the numbers, but at the end of the day, it comes back to the culture.
Culture is enormously important. I mean, all the business books I've read, I really hacked through Jack Welch's book. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But if you haven't read, I mean, I think the buzz one at the moment is Phil Knight. Shoe Dog. If you haven't read Shoe Dog, you must read Shoe Dog. It's the guy who started Nike. One of the best reads at the moment. If you read Richard Branson's book, if you read Bill Gates's book, if you listen to Bill Clinton, everything comes down to the people. You know, Bill Clinton didn't become president without a great staff around him. You know, it doesn't matter what business you're in. And if you're the sole business, if you're the sole proprietor, well, then you really need to look at yourself and don't trade with an ego. Do it, and yeah, culture is very important.
So thank you, and thanks for sharing the building blocks of Lego with us.
You're waiting about an hour for that one. Yeah.
I just want to open up to the floor. Are there any questions? Robert, yes.
I've got two questions.
Sure.
The first one is, how different is the South African consumer compared to the overseas consumer in terms of the Lego business?
Sure.
And secondly, how do you view threat competition from guys like Amazon for your online business?
So Amazon, let me start with the second question because it's shorter. Amazon hasn't come into the country yet. We are anticipating that they will come in. At the moment, I mean, so I think the big thing with online is the competition really comes in from a price perspective. So there are guys who discount, and you know, it's only the move of a click away. So if you compare my product and it's 100 rand and the next guy's 95 rand, you know, if the service delivery is going to be the same, you're going to go to the guy with 95 rand. That's what you're saying. The unique thing, and we are in a fortunate position, we didn't chat about this, the unique thing with the Lego certified stores and the stores that we operate is we've got point of difference. So we've got exclusivity on certain products, and we've got a rewards program that we've got. And what I'll say, we battle with discounting. So the likes of an Amazon will present a big challenge, but we also have a unique product offering on our website and in our stores. And it's an easy thing to say sitting in this chair, but you need to think about what you can offer that's unique that your competitor doesn't have. And I know, again, another cliche for you, but at Lego, we've got we find unique offerings that draw you in and keep you coming back that another retailer's not giving you. So we believe that point of difference should keep us relevant. And then to go back to your first question about the consumer, the consumer, funny enough, for Lego in this country is not that different to overseas. In fact, we're very fortunate in this country because this country's got a very big adult market for Lego. So Lego's got a very high desirability and collectability around it. And Lego's tapped into that. We fall into the same market actually as Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and we were just on a sales and marketing trip with those guys. Like Saudi's got a problem because they don't have that adult market. So a lot of their market is small in terms of who they can sell to. So we are fortunate. What I do want to say though, on the jewelry side, it's a different thing. On the jewelry side, we've got challenges because we've got a very weak currency, and we've got a low affordability kind of situation in this country. So, you know, someone in Europe who doesn't have the same kind of cost overheads and maybe more affordability can afford something like a 20,000 rand watch a lot easier than someone in this country can. So on the jewelry side, we find a big difference. And we have a market like 9 carats. And if you know this, we're one of the only countries in the world that use 9 carat gold. States use 10 carat, otherwise everyone else uses 14 carat and 18 carat. So the jewelry side is actually far more of a complicated, how can I put it? There's a lot more complicated planning in terms of the stock that we put on our shelves on the jewelry side. It was.
So you bought into 2 known brands, Lego and Pandora.
Yes.
A lot of the businesses that we deal with are starting brands, well, they're not branded, are starting up businesses in retail of their own. What advice would you give them to, how do they get to market? How do they, how do you take an unknown and actually start to get somewhere with it? And how long do you stick with it until you know it's a dead horse?
So starting with the last question, I think it's tough to know how long to stick with it. I've got a friend who started an online business for repetitive baby products, like formula. So I don't know if you know, in the States, there's a business called, I think it was called Dollar Shaving Club. But if you research this, unbelievable business. So she had this idea to start a similar kind of concept, but with baby products. Now, she very quickly learned that actually, I didn't even know this, that the pricing of formula is regulated and the margin of formula is regulated. I didn't know that. And that put a stay on her business. So she stuck with it for a couple of years. For me, I'm a big brand guy. I've always liked big brands. If you take a lesson from those big brands, why do people buy brands? People buy brands because they trust in them. So why go to a business like Wolf Brothers? Because you would look at them and say, well, they've got a heritage that goes back to 1902. So the advice I would give you is, if you're starting your own business, certainly in a retail space, I think what you want to focus on is the underlying trust factor, because people are not going to buy your product first. They're going to buy you. They're going to buy the trust that you're selling. And I think that there's a business that built up quite, I don't know a lot about them, but I've seen them, and my partner sat next to the guys at a Canal Walk function. There's a business called Freedom of Movement, which is a clothing brand, and you'll see lots of people wearing their shoes, and they're in the malls and they're expanding. They are that kind of business. Started with some basic shoes, some basic leather goods, and now they've got stores all over the country. My advice would be is to think about what you're doing to build brand equity and to build trust in what you're doing. And that goes down to the quality of what you're selling, how it looks, how it sells, how durable it is, because that's going to help grow it. And the products that I've seen, I mean, there's a lady who does designer costume jewelry, and she's got a store now in Hyde Park. She started as like a flea market, I think. So, she's got a unique design and she's built a name for herself. So I think the key takeaways for me would be trust and brand equity. There was a question.
Yeah. You say you opened the Lego, you imported Lego about 15 years ago. About 15 years ago, the exchange rate was about 4-5 rand in the dollar. Today is 19 rand to the dollar. How does that affect your sales?
So just to correct, we started with Lego in 2018 with the standalone stores, but at that stage, you're quite right, the rand then I think was about 10, 11. So same principle. Look, I think the challenge we've got, and certainly to stay away from political conversation, is if the one thing South Africa has taught us, going all the way back to those dinner conversations that we had around my dinner table or my parents' dinner table in the 1980s, we live in a country with a depreciating currency, and it's not going to get stronger. It's not going to go back to 8 rand. That's just my opinion. So it is a challenge for us, especially where there's an importation on product. The reality of it is that just affects our inflation. So, we've had price increases. We've seen it. I mean, I actually think that the more relevant answer to your question is on the jewelry side. When I traveled to my first trade show in the East in 2005, we were buying stock at 6.50 rand to the dollar with 20% import duty. So what is that? 7.90 rand, 8 rand odd, which we thought was exorbitant. Now, 19 rand to the dollar with 20% import duty, 24 rand. So it has a direct effect. And I think the challenge for us and this again, my opinion, let me just reiterate my opinion, is it's a challenge for the emerging side of our markets in South Africa and the affordability. And from what we're seeing at the moment, businesses that are targeting the lower income earning customer are really battling, because the lower income earning customers' purchasing power has not kept up with the real rate of inflation because of these types of costs. So on a premium side with a toy like Lego, or let's say with a premium brand like a Tag Heuer watch, that side of the market still has purchasing power. But if you're selling a product aimed at a low income earning person, I think it's a good question. I think you need to really think about your pricing, because it's a side of the market that is really battling at the moment.
Another problem, wealthy people actually are immigrating out, they're leaving the country.
Yes. Wealthy people are leaving the country, and we're also seeing a large move down to the coast. I mean, that's been a trend since COVID. But I think, I mean, it's interesting because since COVID, I mean, the retail numbers have been good for all malls. We had a meeting with the centre manager in Canal Walk, and Canal Walk is way ahead of pre-2020 figures. So retail is still very strong. Yeah, we need to try and keep the lights on.
I believe there's a lot of people going to that.
Yeah, on a raft.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. At what point do you also temper the inflation rate of Lego and bring in your own locally manufactured brand? Did you ever do that?
No. No, don't do that. So I'm glad you asked the question because it is tempting. I mean, it's interesting. I went and go back. So again, remember, I'm coming from a very strong brand perspective, and people may differ. We've signed on to having this beautiful environment in super regional malls with, where you come in with your kids or as an adult and you get immersed into that environment. If you're going to start diluting that, one drop of water into the batter is going to absolutely ruin the batter, and you're going to throw that whole batter out very quickly. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have customers coming in for that brand environment, and they're going to say, but why is there something else? And it's interesting, I went to an exhibition before we opened our first store, and the guy had the opportunity to only use Lego, and at the checkout, he had Chinese knockoffs of Lego. But it doesn't make sense now, but he was anxious for sales. He was anxious to find something else that came in. So rather than you've got to find something complementary. That's what I will say. Find something complementary. Difficult where you've signed a contract with the brand. So we're a slight exception because we've got a contract with Lego. If I go put Playmobil in the shop, that's, game over.
Could you open separate stores for the lower
maybe
markets?
We've toyed with that.
With the cheaper blocks.
Maybe not cheaper blocks. Maybe it's Barbie. Maybe it's Peg Perego. So this is, to be honest, my partners and I were thinking about that. We believe we've built a really good engine in the Lego certified stores. We're thinking, could we repeat that with a different brand? But it doesn't have to be toys. And I'm not looking for a medal here, but that was the light that went on with Pandora to Lego. I saw the sales, I saw the environment, and I said, this is just Pandora, but it's in boxes and it's a toy. So it's hard to find, business books, they'll talk about the unicorns. It's hard to find those unicorns. It really is, because there are only so many of them out there. I would be cautious about diluting what you're doing. Go back to your question just now. Build your brand, have your flavor for what you're doing. If you're going to do something, it must make sense with why you're doing it with it. If you've got a shop like Pandora, maybe a complementary product is jewelry cleaning materials, which Pandora don't sell. It doesn't conflict. But don't go try bring in another charm brand because it's going to dilute that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Last question. Yeah.
What convinced you that you were going to make money with Lego in South Africa? What was that?
I think, to quote my dad, I felt it was too big to fail. Which may sound like a kind of, come on. But let me go back to the planning question quickly. I'll tell you what I did. I did that operating model that I spoke about. I looked at how many boxes of Lego I've got. I had insight into what rentals are. I had insight into what staff costs are, which, to be honest, you guys could find out. If you wanted to go open a shop in Rosebank Shopping Mall, it'd be very easy for you to find out what a rental, what those costs would be. Then I looked at the stock. So I'm evaluating risk here. I looked at the stock and I said, okay, listen, if I need R1 million worth of stock to stock that store, how risky is the stock? Now I can see how sellable Lego is. But even if the business doesn't work, where's my risk? My risk was in the shop fittings, in the capital that we needed to buy the fittings to fit the store in Sandton. Because if the store wasn't working, it wouldn't go to zero like that. We would start losing money. We would start declining. You'd then go have a conversation with the landlord. You would have to try, I suppose, get out of your lease. And then I'd have a fire sale and sell the stock. So I evaluated what all that risk was, if that makes sense. And I do have an appetite for some risk. And that's some people like to drive at 20 and some people drive at 120. So that's a personal choice you've got to make up for yourself. I just felt when I looked at all of those factors, it was too good to miss the opportunity to try. And I would rather have taken the opportunity and tried and failed, they're not taking the opportunity. And that's a personal thing.
On a high-end brand, how long did it take you to be profitable? A well-known, and was it consistent here as it is abroad?
In retail, we're talking about. So I'll tell you something scary about retail. You have to be profitable in retail straight away. You can't have a business where you're chewing capital, because eventually you're going to run out of capital. These shops can become like money pits. So you have to have a sense that you have to have a degree of profitability straight away. It doesn't have to be crazy profits, not buying super yachts and Rolls Royces, but you have to be retaining a bit of income so that you can buy into the new assortment. Because what's going to happen is you're going to be in 2019, you're going to have R1 million worth of stock. You're not going to have sold all your stock. Then you've got a January launch coming in and you need another 100,000 Rand for that stock. You've got to have some capital to put into that new assortment. So the bottom line is you need to be profitable very quickly. I would say within a few months. And sorry, the other part of the question was compared to
Overseas. Was the market here the same? Because it's a high-end product here.
Yes.
Market is the high-end market here the same? If you talk about Louis Vuitton, you talk about Pandora, talk about Lego. Is it the same here?
I think it's. To answer your question, I think it's very much the same. I think our volumes are just very, very different. We had an online call with the guys who got the Lego stores in Mexico, and Mexico City is just enormous. And keep in mind, we're a small country, so I know we've got 60 million odd people, but break it down to what our purchasing power is. I would say our purchasing power is under 1.5 million. Okay, so we had a set that launched, and I said to the guy, "How did you do with it?" He said, "No, we did very well. We sold 800 of those like in the first month or two." He said, "How do you do?" And I looked at my past, I thought, "Gee, I thought we did well, but we only sold 200." For those who've had the fortune to travel, you walk down the Champs-Élysées, you walk down the street in Munich, you walk down, Oxford Street in London. Our market is small. Don't forget that, and prepare yourself for that.
But in that walk down issue, I think one of the very important things is to shop the opposition. Know the market.
Absolutely. And that Lego story that I told you started in an opposition store. And I walk into all of my opposition stores. I was in Durban yesterday, and I walk, absolutely, you have to, totally agree. Yeah.
Great, I think it's a great place to end it. And just a quick little anecdote about...
Sorry, the halo effect.
Did I not talk about the halo effect? David?
You did.
Not to the extent that I wanted to.
Well, that I don't know.
Okay, we've got 1 minute. Okay, so we talk about the halo effect. It's a bit of a cliche as well, but remember that as your business grows, you're going to get a halo effect of other things happening. So we opened a store in all of Africa last year. We had very high hopes for it. It hasn't performed as well as we wanted to. It's not totally non-profitable though. It's kind of there, but it's not. But that's not great. It's got to be properly profitable. Our online business and our other shops, Sandton, have grown tremendously this year. Now, what does that say? Is Mall of Africa, maybe even though it's breaking even, making a little bit of profit, what's it doing for those businesses? So in a business like ours, where we can open more branches, it lifts, the whole tide rises. And there was another thing I wanted to say about the halo effect. It wasn't just around the marketing aspect of it. I think it was something to do with the financing of it. It'll come to me just now. If I remember correctly, I'll come find you after we finish. But look, the halo effect's difficult when you're in a startup stage. We only started seeing that effect in year 4 and year 3 and 5, because you start seeing the effect of someone knowing I can get Lego. So your online sales go up in Cape Town, our online sales go up in Rustenburg, they go up in Potchefstroom, wherever it might be, because your footprint grows. So even though Mall of Africa isn't what we want it to be, our online business is continually growing at double-digit percentage growth. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. You can have
one last anecdote about Lego. Do you know that the biggest producer of car tires in the world is Lego? They make more tires
than the producer
than Goodyear and all that. They're obviously smaller, but they make more tires than any other tire.
And the minifigure population is the biggest population in the world.
Is that so?
Yeah, little minifigures.
Yeah.
Bigger than any other population.
What do you mean? Bigger than all the people in China?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So smaller is bigger. Great.
I'm gonna hang around for 10-15 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert.
I'm David Zidel, and I look forward to seeing you next time in the boardroom.